Picture a quiet morning in Lighthouse Park, Charleston, where the calm hides a storm about to erupt. At 80, Samuel Hayes sits on a weathered bench, sunlight glinting off his silver hair, his pressed shirt and leather satchel filled with historical documents, speaking to a life of resilience. He's no ordinary man. He's a living legend who fought to make this park open to all. The scent of his coffee mingles with birdsong, stirring pride and bittersweet memories of battles against prejudice. Each sip is a moment of peace, but his heart aches recalling past injustices. Then a young cop, Officer Mark Tanner, struts up, his smirk dripping with arrogance, pegging Samuel as an easy target. That smug look stings, yet Samuel's calm gaze holds firm, his dignity unshaken. What happens next will shake the city to its core. For Americans 45 and up, this story of quiet strength and explosive truth will hit home. Will Samuel stand his ground? Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. The morning sun still bathed Lighthouse Park in a golden glow, but the tranquility that Samuel Hayes savored moments ago on his bench was now a distant memory. As the scent of his coffee faded, replaced by the tension in the air, Officer Mark Tanner's shadow loomed larger, his boots crushing the grass with deliberate menace. The 80-year-old's heart, heavy with memories of past struggles, thudded with a mix of weariness and defiance. This wasn't just a park to Samuel. It was sacred ground, won through decades of protests he'd led to ensure everyone could sit here freely. The audacity of Tanner, a young cop barely out of training, to question his right to exist in this space cut deeper than any insult. Yet Samuel's weathered face remained a mask of calm, his eyes locking onto Tanner's with a fire forged in years of facing down injustice. Tanner's voice dripped with contempt. "Show me some ID, old man," he barked, his hand twitching near his holster, fingers itching for control. The words echoed the same ugly suspicion Samuel had heard in the 1960s, when he marched these very paths under the threat of batons and dogs. His grip tightened on his cane, not from fear but from a resolve as unyielding as the oak trees overhead. "I don't carry ID to sit in a park I helped build," Samuel said, his voice low, steady, each syllable a quiet rebellion. The air crackled, thick with the weight of history repeating itself. Bystanders, a jogger pausing mid-stride, a mother clutching her child's hand, began to notice, their phones subtly raised, capturing the moment. Tanner's face flushed red, pride and prejudice warring within him. "You're refusing a lawful order," he snapped, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing Samuel's frame. The old man didn't flinch. "I'm refusing to surrender my dignity," he replied, his words slicing through the tension like a blade. The crowd grew, their murmurs a soft chorus of unease. A dog walker slowed, his golden retriever tilting its head, sensing the shift. Samuel's chest tightened, not from age, but from the raw pain of being reduced to a suspect in a place he'd fought to make his own. Yet his posture remained tall, a testament to a lifetime of standing firm. Then Tanner grabbed Samuel's arm, the sudden jolt sending a sharp pain through the elder's shoulder. His cane wobbled but didn't fall, just like Samuel himself. Gasps rippled through the onlookers, phones now openly recording. Samuel's voice, though strained, held steady. "This isn't about park rules. It's about what you see when you look at me." The accusation hung heavy, a truth Tanner couldn't dodge. For Americans 45 and up, this moment resonates. How far have we come if an elder's dignity is still under siege? Will Tanner back down, or will this spark a reckoning? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share where you're watching from. The tension in Lighthouse Park crackled like a live wire. The morning's peace shattered as Officer Mark Tanner's grip tightened on Samuel Hayes' arm. The 80-year-old's shoulder throbbed, a sharp reminder of the indignity he'd faced decades ago in this very park, where he'd marched for the right to sit without fear. His cane trembled in his hand, but his spirit stood firm, unbowed by Tanner's arrogance. The crowd, joggers, parents, dog walkers, held their breath, phones recording every second of the confrontation that had spiraled from a simple request for ID into a public affront. Samuel's voice, steady despite the pain, had just cut through the air. "This isn't about park rules. It's about what you see when you look at me." Tanner's face twisted, caught between rage and the growing realization that eyes were on him, judging, waiting. Then a voice sliced through the standoff, sharp and commanding. "Officer, that's enough!" Heads turned, and Samuel's gaze shifted past Tanner to a man stepping forward from the shadows near the playground. Dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, he'd been invisible until now, blending into the park's rhythm, but his presence was undeniable, calm, authoritative, like a storm held in check. Tanner spun, his hand dropping from Samuel's arm as he barked, "This is police business, sir. Move along." The man didn't budge, his eyes sharp under the brim of his cap, locked onto Tanner's with a weight that made the young cop falter. "No," he said simply. "I'll stay right here." The crowd murmured, sensing a shift. A jogger's camera zoomed in, and a mother's grip on her child loosened, her curiosity piqued. Tanner's bravado crumbled as the man reached into his pocket, slow and deliberate. Samuel's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a flicker of hope that this wasn't just another bystander. The man pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gleaming badge. United States Department of Justice. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Tanner blinked, his face paling as the reality hit. "Release him now," the man ordered, his voice steel-wrapped in velvet. Samuel staggered back, his arm free, and steadied himself with his cane, his chest heaving with relief and lingering anger. The man's badge wasn't just a symbol. It was a promise of accountability, a lifeline in a moment that could have broken lesser men. "I'm Nathaniel Carter, Deputy Attorney General," the man said, his tone now softer as he addressed Samuel. "Are you hurt, Mr. Hayes?" Samuel's eyes, glistening with unshed tears, met Carter's. "I'll live," he said, voice rough but resolute, echoing the strength that had carried him through decades of battles. Tanner stood frozen, his authority evaporating as Carter turned to him, eyes narrowing. "You've unlawfully detained a citizen without cause. You're now under federal investigation." Sirens wailed in the distance, and two black SUVs rolled into the park, federal agents spilling out with quiet efficiency. The crowd parted, phones still rolling, capturing the moment Tanner's career began to unravel. Carter nodded to the agents, who approached Tanner, one hand near his sidearm. "You'll go with them," Carter said, and Tanner, defeated, dropped his gaze. Samuel watched, his heart a tangle of sorrow and vindication. This wasn't just about him. It was about every elder, every person who'd been dismissed, harassed, erased. For Americans 45 and up, this is a wake-up call. When does a badge become a weapon? Will justice prevail for Samuel? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. The air in Lighthouse Park, once thick with tension, seemed to exhale as federal agents led Officer Mark Tanner away, his head bowed, the weight of his actions dragging behind him like chains. Samuel Hayes, still clutching his cane, felt the sting in his shoulder where Tanner's grip had bruised him, a painful echo of the confrontation that had unfolded just minutes ago. The 80-year-old's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a bittersweet surge of vindication and sorrow. The crowd, joggers, parents, dog walkers, stood frozen, their phones still recording, capturing the moment when Nathaniel Carter, Deputy Attorney General, had flipped the script with a single flash of his Justice Department badge. Samuel's words, "This isn't about park rules, it's about what you see when you look at me," still hung in the air, a challenge that had sparked a reckoning. Now, as the black SUVs vanished behind the oak trees, the park felt different, charged, alive, as if the ground itself had shifted. Samuel lowered himself back onto the weathered bench, his coffee long cold, his newspaper fluttering in the breeze. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the raw emotion of being seen, truly seen, after decades of fighting to be acknowledged. Nathaniel Carter approached, his hoodie no longer hiding the authority that radiated from him. "Mr. Hayes," he said, voice soft but firm, "we need to talk about what comes next." Samuel looked up, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion creeping into his bones. "Next?" he asked, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Son, I've been through too many nexts to believe this ends here." Carter's nod was one of respect, a silent acknowledgement of the elder's hard-won wisdom. Carter knelt beside the bench, leveling his gaze with Samuel's. "We've been monitoring Lighthouse Park for weeks," he explained. Reports of racial profiling, harassment, abuse of power, they've been piling up. We needed undeniable proof, and today, you gave it to us. Samuel's chest tightened, a mix of pride and pain. You used me as bait? He asked, his voice low, not accusing, but seeking truth. Carter's jaw clenched, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. I hate that it came to this, he admitted, but your courage, those videos, the witnesses, it's airtight. Tanner's done, and this department's about to face a federal storm. Samuel exhaled, the weight of the moment settling deep. He wasn't just a victim. He was the spark that could burn down a rotten system. Carter stood, offering a hand to help Samuel rise. We need your statement at the station, he said. It's your choice, but your voice could change everything. Samuel gripped his cane, pushing himself upright without assistance, his pride a quiet fire. I'll go, he said, not because you asked, but because I owe it to every soul who sat on this bench before me. The crowd parted as they walked toward the SUVs, some nodding in solidarity, others whispering words of thanks. A young boy, no older than 12, saluted Samuel, his small hand trembling with awe. Samuel paused, returning the gesture with 2 fingers to his brow, a silent promise that this fight was for him too. At the Charleston Police Department, the atmosphere was electric with unease. Officers in the lot glanced nervously at the federal vehicles, their radios crackling with uncertainty. Inside, Samuel and Carter were led to a small interview room, gray walls, a battered table, 2 plastic chairs that creaked under weight. Samuel sat, his cane resting against his knee, and faced 2 internal affairs investigators whose stiff postures betrayed their discomfort. Mr. Hayes, one began, we need your account of the incident with Officer Tanner. Samuel's voice, rough but unwavering, recounted every detail. Tanner's approach, the baseless demand for ID, the accusation of loitering, the painful grab that had nearly toppled him. He didn't embellish, he didn't need to. The truth was a blade, cutting through the room's fragile pretense. The investigators scribbled notes, their pens tapping nervously. They knew this wasn't a routine complaint. We'll review the body cam and bystander footage, one said, voice tight. Carter, leaning against the wall, interjected. Review it carefully. Obstruction of justice carries federal penalties. The investigators nodded, fleeing the room with their clipboards. Alone, Carter sat across from Samuel, his expression softening. You handled that like a man half your age, he said. Samuel chuckled, tired but resolute. Practice, he replied, a single word carrying decades of survival. Outside, the media had descended, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Protesters gathered, their signs demanding justice, their voices a growing chorus. Samuel's story was no longer his alone. It was Charleston's, America's. The videos had gone viral, Tanner's name plastered across every news channel. Carter leaned forward. This isn't just about Tanner, he said. It's about a system that let him thrive. We're tearing it down, but we need you to help us build something better. Samuel's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with purpose. He'd fought for this park, this city, his whole life. Now at 80, he was being called to fight again, not with fists, but with the truth. For Americans 45 and up, this moment hits hard. How many Samuels have we ignored, dismissed, silenced? His stand in Lighthouse Park isn't just a story, it's a mirror showing us what's still broken and what we can fix together. Will Samuel's voice spark lasting change, or will it fade like so many before? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and let's keep this conversation alive. The Charleston Police Department's gray walls still echoed with the weight of Samuel Hayes' statement, given just hours after his harrowing encounter in Lighthouse Park. The 80-year-old's voice, steady as he recounted Officer Mark Tanner's unjust aggression, had left the internal affairs investigators rattled, their hurried exit a testament to the storm brewing. As Samuel stepped out of the interview room, his cane tapping softly, the sting in his shoulder from Tanner's grip lingered, a reminder of the indignity he'd endured. Yet the fire in his eyes burned brighter, fueled by Nathaniel Carter's revelation that this wasn't just about one rogue cop. It was about dismantling a system that had protected Tanner for too long. The federal SUVs outside, the protesters' chants growing louder, and the viral videos spreading like wildfire signaled a city on the brink of reckoning. Samuel's stand, sparked by a simple moment on a park bench, had ignited something unstoppable. Outside, the Charleston air was thick with humidity and hope. News vans lined the streets, their cameras trained on the growing crowd. Mothers clutching signs, young men with clenched fists, elders nodding in quiet solidarity. Samuel's story had cracked open a dam, and stories of harassment, profiling, and buried complaints poured out. At a city council meeting days later, the room overflowed with residents, their voices raw with pain. An elderly woman spoke of her grandson, frisked for playing too late in the park. A shop owner described officers intimidating his workers. Samuel sat in the back, his cane propped beside him, listening as the silence found their courage. His heart swelled with pride but ached with the familiarity of it all. He'd heard these stories in the 1960s, when he marched for this very park. Now at 80, he was witnessing history demand its due. The federal probe, led by Carter, moved swiftly. Investigations revealed Tanner's history, complaints of profiling and excessive force from his previous post, mysteriously erased. But the rot went deeper. Supervisors who ignored reports, policies that shielded bad actors, training stuck in the 1980s. Indictments followed, seismic in their scope. The police chief, 3 captains, 6 senior officers, all charged with obstruction, civil rights violations, and abuse of power. Charleston's streets buzzed with shock and celebration. Protesters chanted, "Justice for Samuel," outside City Hall, their voices a chorus of possibility. Samuel watched the news from his modest home, gripping his cane as cheers erupted on screen. Tears pricked his eyes, not for himself, but for the generations who'd waited for this crack in the system's armor. Yet Samuel knew indictments weren't enough. Change required roots, not just headlines. He began meeting with activists, clergy, even nervous officers seeking redemption, all in Lighthouse Park, on the same bench where it started. His presence drew crowds. Some thanked him, others cried, a few glared, their resentment a reminder that progress always breeds resistance. One morning, a threatening letter slid under his door. "Stay silent." Samuel folded it calmly, fear an old foe he'd long outlasted. At a town hall, he stood beside Carter, addressing a packed room. "This isn't my victory," he said, voice rough but resolute. "It's ours. But it's only a start. Rewrite the rules, train the officers, listen to the people, or we'll be back here again." The applause was thunderous, a pledge to keep fighting. For Americans 45 and up, Samuel's fight mirrors our own battles, against systems that dismiss, against silence that suffocates. His courage shows change is possible, but only if we demand it. Will Charleston rebuild, or will the old ways creep back? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and let's keep this fire burning. The Charleston Police Department's gray walls still echoed with the weight of Samuel Hayes' statement, given just hours after his harrowing encounter in Lighthouse Park. The 80-year-old's voice, steady as he recounted Officer Mark Tanner's unjust aggression, had left the internal affairs investigators rattled, their hurried exit a testament to the storm brewing. As Samuel stepped out of the interview room, his cane tapping softly, the sting in his shoulder from Tanner's grip lingered, a reminder of the indignity he'd endured. Yet the fire in his eyes burned brighter, fueled by Nathaniel Carter's revelation that this wasn't just about one rogue cop. It was about dismantling a system that had protected Tanner for too long. The federal SUVs outside, the protesters' chants growing louder, and the viral videos spreading like wildfire signaled a city on the brink of reckoning. Samuel's stand, sparked by a simple moment on a park bench, had ignited something unstoppable. Outside, the Charleston air was thick with humidity and hope. News vans lined the streets, their cameras trained on the growing crowd. Mothers clutching signs, young men with clenched fists, elders nodding in quiet solidarity. Samuel's story had cracked open a dam, and stories of harassment, profiling, and buried complaints poured out. At a city council meeting days later, the room overflowed with residents, their voices raw with pain. An elderly woman spoke of her grandson, frisked for playing too late in the park. A shop owner described officers intimidating his workers. Samuel sat in the back, his cane propped beside him, listening as the silence found their courage. His heart swelled with pride but ached with the familiarity of it all. He'd heard these stories in the 1960s when he marched for this very park. Now at 80, he was witnessing history demand its due. The federal probe, led by Carter, moved swiftly. Investigations revealed Tanner's history, complaints of profiling and excessive force from his previous post, mysteriously erased. But the rot went deeper. Supervisors who ignored reports, policies that shielded bad actors, training stuck in the 1980s. Indictments followed, seismic in their scope. The police chief, 3 captains, 6 senior officers, all charged with obstruction, civil rights violations, and abuse of power. Charleston's streets buzzed with shock and celebration. Protesters chanted, "Justice for Samuel," outside City Hall, their voices a chorus of possibility. Samuel watched the news from his modest home, gripping his cane as cheers erupted on screen. Tears pricked his eyes, not for himself, but for the generations who'd waited for this crack in the system's armor. Yet Samuel knew indictments weren't enough. Change required roots, not just headlines. He began meeting with activists, clergy, even nervous officers seeking redemption, all in Lighthouse Park, on the same bench where it started. His presence drew crowds. Some thanked him, others cried, a few glared, their resentment a reminder that progress always breeds resistance. One morning, a threatening letter slid under his door. "Stay silent." Samuel folded it calmly, fear an old foe he'd long outlasted. At a town hall, he stood beside Carter, addressing a packed room. "This isn't my victory," he said, voice rough but resolute. "It's ours. But it's only a start. Rewrite the rules, train the officers, listen to the people, or we'll be back here again." The applause was thunderous, a pledge to keep fighting. For Americans 45 and up, Samuel's fight mirrors our own battles, against systems that dismiss, against silence that suffocates. His courage shows change is possible, but only if we demand it. Will Charleston rebuild, or will the old ways creep back? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and let's keep this fire burning. The echoes of Charleston's awakening still reverberated from the packed city council meetings and the federal indictments that had shaken the police department to its core. Samuel Hayes, the 80-year-old whose quiet defiance on a Lighthouse Park bench had sparked this upheaval, felt the weight of it all as he walked through the park days after his powerful statement at the station. The bruise on his shoulder from Officer Mark Tanner's grip had faded, but the memory of that confrontation, amplified by Nathaniel Carter's federal intervention and the viral videos that followed, burned bright. The city was no longer just a backdrop, it was a battleground for change, with Samuel's stand as its catalyst. The chants of "Justice for Samuel" from protesters, the stories of pain shared at town halls, and the indictments of corrupt officers had cracked open a system long overdue for reckoning. Yet Samuel knew real change wasn't in the headlines. It was in the work that came next, and he was ready to lead it. Samuel's role as a symbol of resistance grew, though he never sought the spotlight. His mornings in Lighthouse Park became a ritual of connection, not solitude. On that same scuffed bench, he met with young activists, their eyes blazing with hope, parents, their voices trembling with fear for their children, and even officers, heads bowed, seeking ways to mend what they'd helped break. Each conversation was a thread in a tapestry of change, weaving together a community that had too long been divided. Samuel's heart swelled with pride as he listened to a teenage girl describe her dream of a park where no one feared a badge. But it ached with the weight of history, decades of marches, arrests, and losses that had led to this moment. The threatening letter under his door, "Stay silent," only steeled his resolve. He'd faced worse than anonymous cowards in the 1960s, and he wasn't about to falter now. When Charleston's mayor called, Samuel was wary but curious. The meeting, held in her polished office with Nathaniel Carter present, was no photo op. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice earnest, "we need your wisdom to rebuild this city's trust." Samuel leaned on his cane, studying her. He'd heard promises before, smooth words that dissolved like sugar in rain. "You're not asking me," he said sharply. "You're asking the man the cameras made me." The mayor didn't flinch. "I'm asking the man who's been fighting for this city since before I was born." Her sincerity disarmed him, and after a long pause, he agreed. Not as a figurehead, but as a partner. Bring in the people, he insisted, not just suits. The mothers, the kids, the ones who've bled for this park. Carter chuckled. You're already leading. Samuel shrugged, a tired smile flickering. I've been leading my whole life. Folks just started noticing. Samuel's role on the advisory board was no token gesture. He pushed for community voices to shape new policies, mandatory bias training, civilian oversight with teeth, officers walking beats to know their neighbors, not just patrol them. At board meetings, he spoke plainly, his cane tapping for emphasis. Change isn't a speech. It's the work you do when no one's watching. His words carried weight, not because of his age, but because of the scars he bore. Each a story of survival, each a lesson in resilience. Outside, the city responded. Protests evolved into planning sessions. Strangers became allies. A hardware store owner, once dismissive of troublemakers, now funded community forums. Families crossed old neighborhood lines, their children playing together in the park Samuel had fought for. Yet resistance simmered. Some officers glared at Samuel during public events, their tight jaws betraying loyalty to the old ways. Online, hate mail and smear campaigns called him a relic, a divider. Samuel read each message, filed them away, and kept moving. He wasn't fighting for applause. He was fighting for the boy who'd saluted him in the park, for the mother who'd nodded in solidarity, for a future where dignity didn't require a badge's permission. At a community meeting, he stood before a diverse crowd, black, white, young, old, and said, "This board, these policies, they're not mine. They're ours, but we've got to hold the line, or they'll bury it all again." The room erupted in steady, determined applause, a promise to carry on. For Americans 45 and up, Samuel's leadership is a call to action. He's not just a man who stood up to a cop. He's proof that one voice, rooted in truth, can shift a city's soul. His work on the board shows change isn't a gift. It's a fight we all share. Will Charleston's reforms take root, or will backlash snuff them out? Share your thoughts in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, and let's keep this movement alive. Charleston's streets pulsed with a new energy, a fragile hope woven from the hard-won victories sparked by Samuel Hayes' stand in Lighthouse Park. The 80-year-old's leadership on the advisory board, a role he'd accepted with stern conditions after his pivotal meeting with the mayor and Nathaniel Carter, had begun to reshape the city. His insistence on including real voices, mothers, youth, workers, had turned board meetings into forums of truth, echoing the raw testimonies from the city council after his confrontation with Officer Mark Tanner. The federal indictments, the viral videos, and Samuel's unrelenting presence had forced Charleston to face its scars. But as Samuel walked through the park, his cane tapping the same paths he'd marched decades ago, he knew the fight was far from over. The hate mail, the glares from some officers, the whispers calling him a troublemaker, they were reminders that change, like the oaks overhead, grew slowly and under pressure. That summer, Lighthouse Park hosted Unity Day, a celebration of progress and a testament to Samuel's impact. The air buzzed with laughter, music, and the sizzle of food trucks, a stark contrast to the tension of that fateful morning when Tanner's arrogance had met Samuel's resolve. Children painted their faces, their giggles mingling with the breeze, while families, black, white, brown, shared picnic blankets, a sight Samuel had dreamed of in the 1960s. His heart swelled, but a pang of caution lingered. He'd seen too many victories fade. Invited to speak, Samuel climbed the stage slowly, his cane a steady companion. The crowd hushed, hundreds of eyes, young and old, hopeful and skeptical, fixed on him. Nathaniel Carter adjusted the mic, grinning. "Didn't think you'd miss this," he said. Samuel chuckled. "Not for all the coffee in Charleston." Facing the crowd, Samuel gripped the podium, his voice rough but resonant. "I'm no hero," he began, "just a man who got tired of being pushed off his own bench." Laughter rippled, easing the tension. "This park," he continued, "was built on blood and dreams. I sat here because it's my right, not a favor, not a privilege, a right." His words carried the weight of his advisory board work, where he'd fought for policies to ensure no one else faced Tanner's prejudice. What happened to me wasn't new. It was just seen. And seeing means we can't pretend anymore. Heads nodded, some wiping tears. There's folks hoping we'll tire out. Go quiet. We won't. We're moving forward, and we're bringing everyone with us. The applause roared, a wave of commitment. After his speech, the mayor unveiled a plaque near the park's fountain, inscribed, "Samuel Hayes, a man who reminded us who we could be." Samuel stared at it, his throat tight. He hadn't asked for this, but its words rang true. Not for him alone, but for every elder who'd claimed space against odds. Carter clapped his shoulder. "We getting somewhere?" he asked. Samuel's smile was knowing. "We built the road, son." Yet he saw the officers at the crowd's edge, some clapping, others stone-faced, their resistance a warning. Change was a journey, not a finish line, and Samuel was ready for every step. For Americans 45 and up, Samuel's story is a mirror. His plaque, a symbol of what's possible when we refuse to stay silent. He turned a park into a beacon. But can Charleston sustain this unity? Share your thoughts in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, and let's keep pushing for a future where every bench is a place of peace. The golden hues of autumn settled over Lighthouse Park, where the legacy of Samuel Hayes' stand against injustice had transformed Charleston's heart. The Unity Day celebration, where Samuel's powerful speech and the unveiling of a plaque bearing his name had unified a diverse crowd, still lingered in the city's memory. The 80-year-old's words, "We're moving forward and we're bringing everyone with us," had echoed his advisory board work, pushing for policies to ensure no one faced the prejudice he endured from Officer Mark Tanner. Now a bronze statue stood near the park center, an elder on a bench, coffee in hand, symbolizing every unsung fighter who claimed their place. Samuel rarely visited it, uneasy with being a symbol, but its presence spoke volumes. His cane tapped the same paths he'd marched in the 1960s, each step a testament to a life refusing to yield. One crisp October day, Samuel stood before the statue, surrounded by school children in bright jackets, their teacher urging them to listen. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "a few words?" His heart, heavy with decades of struggle, lifted at their eager faces. "This park once had signs saying who could sit where," he began, voice rough but warm. "Those signs are gone, but some rules inside people's hearts change slower. Keep showing up, sitting down, speaking out." A girl's shy question, "Are you proud?" caught him off guard. He smiled, eyes glistening. "I'm proud of you, fighting when the world's not ready." The kids beamed, their chatter fading as they boarded their buses, leaving Samuel with a quiet hope. That evening, at the park's dedication ceremony for a reformed police department, Samuel spoke again. Under magnolia trees strung with lights, he faced a crowd of old foes and new allies. "Justice isn't a place you arrive," he said, cane tapping for emphasis. "It's a journey, hard, messy, beautiful. Keep walking, even when you're scared." The applause was steady, a heartbeat of resolve. The new chief, a local who knew the community's pulse, and policies like mandatory bias training owed their existence to Samuel's fight. He'd turned a moment of pain into a movement, proving one voice could shift a city. A valuable lesson for our audience. Samuel's story teaches us that courage isn't always loud. It's the quiet act of claiming your space, like sitting on a bench and refusing to be moved by fear or prejudice. For Americans 45 and up, it's a reminder that our actions, no matter how small, plant seeds for change. Every stand we take, every conversation we start, builds a world where dignity is universal. Samuel didn't seek glory, he sought justice, showing us that persistence, even in the face of resistance, can reshape a community. A gentle call to action. Samuel's journey shows what's possible when we stand together. Can we keep this fire burning, ensuring every park is a place of peace? Share your reflections in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, and consider passing this story to someone who needs its hope. Let's keep the conversation alive.